The moment of testing Modi has arrived. India's traditional narrative of winning studies and Trump's tariff penalties have pushed Modi into a desperate situation. India's good days are probably over. Now, will it continue to stand firm against the United States, purchasing oil and weapons from Russia, or bow down and concede, opening its market to the United States and investing in American industries to seek Trump's forgiveness? How will Modi lead India to win again? On the local time of August 3rd, Stephen Miller, a senior advisor to Trump, accused India of purchasing Russian oil, arguing that it was actually funding Russia in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. This statement was almost the harshest criticism from the White House against India. It should be noted that in the past, only China was subjected to such treatment. However, China was framed with false accusations, while India's actions have truly betrayed their most loyal ally, the United States. Therefore, the United States has no intention of indulging India any longer. White House officials have taken turns to criticize their South Asian partner, and Treasury Secretary Yellen even mocked that India is just a small player, clearly trampling on Modi's dignity repeatedly. Under such unprecedented humiliation, the Indian domestic public opinion is almost boiling. The people's favorability towards the United States has dropped to a freezing point, and the opposition parties have frequently jumped out to question Modi's policies. The current situation can be said to be the most difficult moment for Modi since he was elected Prime Minister more than a decade ago. There are two key issues that urgently need to be resolved. First, how to rebuild the national defense and security system. In the past, after India introduced Russian aircraft carriers, S-400 air defense systems, and Rafale fighter jets, its self-confidence once swelled to an unprecedented level. They believed that they were the world's third-largest military power, second only to the United States and Russia. With this perception, Indians not only acted recklessly in South Asia but also looked down on their two northern neighbors. While maintaining a close relationship with Russia, they also enjoyed investment in markets from the United States, living a quite comfortable life. However, all this came to an abrupt end after India's defeat in the India-Pakistan air battle. Pakistan, having only obtained some things that slipped through China's fingers, defeated India completely. Advanced fighter jets and air defense systems were destroyed, and the two aircraft carriers were too scared to set sail at all. A small-scale conflict exposed the true colors of the Indian military. The so-called world's third military power is nothing more than a third-rate motley army. For a country like India, losing the reliance on military power is equivalent to a tiger losing its teeth. It has no deterrent power at all and will also have endless troubles. Therefore, Modi needs to re-establish military deterrence. For example, the plan to purchase fifth-generation fighter jets must be implemented as soon as possible. Although India keeps talking about developing its own fifth-generation fighter jets, they themselves know that it is an impossible task. So the best option is to purchase from outside. Currently, the only fifth-generation fighter jets India can choose from are Russia's Su-57 and the United States F-35. In fact, Trump has long hoped that India would purchase the F-35, but was politely rejected by Modi. The main reason is that the Indian Air Force's equipment is mainly Russian and French-made. If another American-made fighter jet is added, it will be a disaster for the Air Force's logistics and maintenance system. Moreover, the use of American-made fighter jets has various restrictions. After the F-35 is purchased, it will most likely become a useless item that can only be seen but not used. India is not stupid enough to jump into such an obvious trap. In addition, India also hopes to obtain some production technology of fifth-generation fighter jets, which is something the United States cannot satisfy. Therefore, the only fifth-generation fighter jet that meets India's requirements is the Su-57. Coincidentally, Russia is in great need of funds now and will naturally not be so resistant to India's additional requirements. It is very likely that the two sides will reach a purchase cooperation agreement. However, this will create a new problem. If India cooperates with Russia again, it will inevitably anger the United States. Modi now needs to resolve a second contradiction: how to balance relations between the United States and Russia. The U.S. and Russia have essentially entered a state of hostility, and Trump is now seeking to tie tariffs to geopolitical stances, a move that has hit India right where it hurts. In the past, India could play both the U.S. and Russia off each other because both major powers saw value in courting it. But the situation has changed. India's importance has diminished significantly. Trump is focused solely on immediate gains and has little interest in long-term strategy. He demands that all allies and adversaries alike fork over real money to help solve America's problems. For example, economies like Japan, South Korea, and those in Europe have not only promised investments in the U.S. but also accepted tariff hikes to 15%. Regardless of how much of that investment actually materializes or who ultimately pays the tariffs, the U.S. government is seeing tangible increases in revenue. Naturally, a country like India, one that often boasts of being the world's fourth largest economy and runs a huge trade surplus with the U.S., cannot escape such sanctions. If India not only stands firm against the U.S. on tariffs but also continues to buy Russian weapons in addition to Russian oil, it will inevitably draw Trump's focused retaliation. India has long thought it can be compared to China, believing it can negotiate with the U.S. from a position of strength and status. But it has forgotten one thing: China dares to stand firm because it holds the U.S. by the throat when it comes to rare earths and enjoys irreplaceable status in global supply chains. India, however, simply has no capability or qualification to challenge the United States. The U.S. is India's largest source of investment and export market. In 2024, the total U.S.-India merchandise trade volume was approximately $128.8 billion, with India enjoying a trade surplus of $45.8 billion with the U.S.-India's exports, including electronic products, chemicals, garments, and agricultural products, are extremely dependent on the U.S. market. If tariffs are raised to 25% or higher, Indian goods will lose their competitiveness, and U.S. import channels may shift to countries like Vietnam and Indonesia. Such a shift would inevitably deal a heavy blow to India's economy. In other words, if India fails to reach a favorable tariff agreement with the U.S., the consequences will be catastrophic. Yet, the U.S. is now using India as a negative example and has no intention of letting India off the hook on trade issues. It will likely not be easy for Modi to get through this smoothly. Trump is now resorting to extreme pressure, forcing Modi to take sides, either accept high U.S. tariffs and open up its market to the U.S., or cut ties with Russia and stop purchasing Russian oil and weapons. The problem is that India cannot do either. Moreover, India cannot afford to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in the U.S. like European countries, Japan, and South Korea have done. U.S.-India trade negotiations have thus reached a stalemate, and India has yet to find a solution to the problem. Although Modi is called a wise elder, he cannot conjure up money out of thin air. Therefore, India is caught in a dilemma. Finding a balance between its own interests and U.S. demands will test Modi's wisdom. What are your thoughts on this? Welcome to leave your comments and discuss.